Hello everyone. So this is an extra episode I hadn't initially planned on really. When I was visiting the sanctuary last year, I sat down to record a few words with ABA President and Executive Director Steph Horner, and it just kind of evolved into a full-on hour-long Q&A session. This included talk about how Steph got initially involved in the sanctuary, her influences, challenges of running the sanctuary, bears, how to recognise bears, unique behaviours we've seen, other wildlife, and much more. And a quick pro tip, obviously when we're in conversation there's a few terms that we throw back and forth, and then it's only later that I think, would someone who's never been to the sanctuary know what we're talking about? So there is a term such as food site that we mention a lot, and this refers to where we place the bear food at within the magic circle. So these are areas like specially placed paving stones and hollowed out logs, and we keep it consistent, so we always put the food in the same area so the bears know where to go. Of course, if there's anything you hear about during this conversation and want to know more, let us know. I trust you'll find it as informative and as fascinating as I did, and I'll be speaking to you in a future episode. So, here it is. There is a place in the remote northwoods of Minnesota, North America. It's located near the town of Orr, population approximately 300. Outside this town is an area where normal rules are put to one side. It's a place where humans and wildlife meet. It's a special place, wholly unique and not without its controversies. This is the Vince Schutte Wildlife Sanctuary, run by the American Bear Association, ABA for short. The ABA is dedicated to promoting a better understanding of black bears and all wildlife through education, observation, and experience. I'm your host, pstubley, and welcome to the Bear Den.
All right, I'm here with Steph. Do you want to introduce yourself for the listeners, please, Steph?
Yep, so my name is Steph Horner. I am currently the Executive Director and the President of the Vince Schutte Wildlife Sanctuary. I have been the Executive Director since 2015, and then I took over the additional role of the President in 2022, and have been juggling both since. I did actually, though, start in 2014 as an intern myself, and just so happened to be lucky enough to be close to graduation when a position was opening up at the sanctuary that following season.
Have you always wanted to work with wildlife?
Oddly, no. I think I did, but I didn't know that I wanted to. I've always had a love of animals. I spent a lot of time in my youth at the zoo. Every weekend, really, I would say I was asking as a child to go to the zoo. I started college as an environmental science major, though, actually, and liked the idea of conservation, too, and saving the world one animal at a time. But my school at the time just offered an environmental science program, and so I was kind of going that route until I came up to Ely, Minnesota for a birthday trip, and ended up going and visiting the International Wolf Center and the North American Bear Center, which I highly recommend visiting both of those. They're both awesome facilities with lots of cool behaviors and just educational things that you can learn. But I was really into wolves and thought maybe I'd want to work with wolves. Came up to the Wolf Center. The wolves weren't doing too much in their enclosures, and so when we went to the Bear Center, I just absolutely fell in love with the bears there. Specifically a bear whose name was Ted. He's not with them anymore. He's passed away a couple years ago, but at the time, they were kind of hand feeding the bears there. The bears would kind of put their paws out. They would put some grapes on top of the paw, and the bears would eat that, and I just thought that was the cutest thing ever, and I kind of fell in love from that point on and knew that I wanted to work with bears. And so that next fall, I switched my major from environmental science to wildlife biology. I transferred to a college that had that program and started looking for bear internships that very next, it would have been winter, spring time that I was looking for an internship, and came across the Vince Schutte Wildlife Sanctuary. I've been a Minnesota native my entire life, and I had never actually heard of them, so I was excited to see that I was going to not have to travel too far to get that internship.
So what's the most rewarding part of the job for you?
Well, of course, it's the bears, but more specifically, getting to witness unique behaviors that you're not going to see in a zoo and behaviors that are rarely ever seen in the wild. Think about how unlikely it is to come across a bear in the wild that's nursing her cubs or disciplining cubs. They're just not things that you see very often. And of course, getting to know the bears on an individual basis. Believe it or not, all of the bears have their own unique personalities. They have their own likes and dislikes. They have their own habits of the trails that they take into the sanctuary, the trails that they take out of the sanctuary, right down to preferred places that they sit and eat within the 2.5 acres that we feed the bears. That never gets old. It's been 10 years that I've worked here now, and I never grow tired of that.
Oh, fab. And so on the flip side, what's the most challenging part of the job?
Personally speaking, it's definitely people management. So when you go into the wildlife field, I was a young kid. I didn't realize that there would be so much people management. You go into the field to work with animals, of course, because you have a love of animals. But it is a lot of people management. Specifically for my position, I'm working with interns and volunteers. I'm working with managers, our board of directors, our founders, the photographers, the general public, and of course, people within the community. It's a lot of people management, and not that, there's pros and cons to that, but it was just something that I didn't really think I was going to have to be doing a lot of. I knew that I would be educating people, but I didn't necessarily think about all the other parts that roll into that.
And as an organization, what sort of challenges would you say you face?
We are a nonprofit, so we don't get state funding. We don't get federal funding. Just like any nonprofit, we're understaffed, we're overworked, and we're always faced with the fact that we can't make changes to the sanctuary without raising funds for years, really. Especially the bigger the project, the longer it takes for us to raise those funds. So yeah, I would say just being a nonprofit has its own challenges.
So what was your vision for the sanctuary when you took over?
I am so excited to say that we have actually just completed what my initial vision was for the sanctuary. So when I started, we did not have flushing toilets, we did not have showers, we did not have laundry on site, certainly did not have electricity or a building that had electricity, air conditioning, or just normal heat. And so that was something that I felt was really important to have. Our team works tirelessly every single day for the bears. And so to have to, after a hard day's work, leave the property, drive 20 minutes to go shower, or almost a half hour to go do your laundry, that sucked. And so it was really important to me to have a facility where we can do those things on site. And so we started raising funds, I believe now it was almost 6 years ago, for what we called an accommodations project. And so basically what that was a facility that would have flushing toilets, showers, laundry, a gathering area, and then of course air conditioning. And so this year we finally were able to have that facility built. And yeah, I think that the kids before are just not going to know how hard we really truly had it. But I'm so glad that we could bring that to future generations of volunteers.
Oh, yeah, and I definitely appreciate it. Yeah. I can say that. Well, what does your family make of your working here?
Yeah, my family thinks that it is the coolest thing ever. My brother comes every year to visit. He brings his boys up. Of course, they think I'm the cool auntie because I'm out there feeding bears, and they absolutely want to come volunteer as soon as they can, which is 18, so they've got a ways to go. They're 3 and 10. My mom actually volunteers at the sanctuary too. So during our public hour season, which is Memorial Day weekend to Labor Day weekend, she works every week, once a week, up in the gift shop for us. So she's obviously really cool with it and loves everything that we're doing here as an organization. My husband actually works at the sanctuary too. He is our chief operations manager. And that first year that I was here, that I was employed in 2015, there was not a position open for Ryan yet. And he came up and volunteered his time that whole summer. And thankfully that next year there was a position that was open. He applied and got that position. So we've been working together here since 2015.
And how does that go for him?
Oh, I'm his boss. So there's definitely pros and cons to that. Yeah. But no, in all seriousness, I think we complement each other. He's great at doing things that I'm not great at or things that I don't like to do. He'll do it all. And I think everybody that works on the management team appreciates that about him.
Going back to the sanctuary, so what's the thing visitors ask the most?
There's a handful of things that people ask. So for those of you that have visited the sanctuary, you probably notice really quickly that the birds are really loud here. For those of you that are listening, you might actually be able to hear the crows and the ravens right now as we speak. That is the most common question. What's that noise? We have been asked before, are those interns calling in the bears? Is that a sound system that's playing noises of the woods? Are those monkeys in the woods making that noise? Are those parrots? They are typically what they're talking about is just the common raven, which you can hear right now as we speak. But I'm also surprised we get a lot of questions about if those are grizzly bears, brown bears roaming down on the ground. So despite the fact that the American black bear is called the American black bear, they have lots of color variations. And quite often we do see bears that are brown or maybe have more of a grizzled look about their fur. And so, yes, I do get asked quite often, are those grizzly bears walking down on the grounds with you guys as well? And then I think on deck too, we just get a lot of questions about, like, do you live here? How did you get this job? Are those the cabins that you live in? What did you have to go to school for to be in this position? Because people just, most visitors think this is just the coolest job ever. So they have a lot of questions about that specifically.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Hello, it's just me. So after our chat, inevitably, I realised there were a couple more questions I wanted to ask Steph, so she kindly recorded a couple more for me. Rather than dropping them in at the end, this feels like an appropriate place to put them. So basically, I asked her how the team go about identifying individual bears, and I asked her just to talk a little bit about how staff and volunteers are trained and a little bit about walking among the bears. So we'll briefly switch to that and then back to the main chat.
Identifying bears can be quite tricky. It is not a skill that everybody has, and it definitely takes some practice. And the longer you work for the sanctuary, for some people, the easier it gets. When I'm trying to identify a bear, I look for lots of different things. So, does the bear have a chest blaze? So about 25% of American black bears have a chest blaze. That is a patch of fur that's typically located as low as their stomach, but as high as their throat. But typically speaking, it is located on their chest, and they can vary in color from being a bright white to a cream, and sometimes even a gold. Occasionally, bears will have a spotted chest blaze. And the unique thing about a chest blaze is that no two are the same. So that's an easy identifier for some bears. I also will look to see what scars the bear has, or if they're missing pieces of their ears. Those things we keep track of, photos over the years of how they've changed, and when they add scars or when scars heal and are not as visible, we keep track of that by photos. And so that can be something that we use to identify a bear. And then we look at their color. So not all American black bears are black. So about 10 to 15% of them are other colors other than black. The most common outside of black would be like a brown color, but we do see variations in that brown color as well. So it's not uncommon to see maybe more of a chestnut colored bear or a cinnamon phase color bear. Of course, we do see the occasional blonde phased bear as well. So we look at that. We also look at the face color. So some bears have all black faces. That's unusual. Some bears have all brown faces. That's unusual. But then some bears have tan muzzles and tan eyebrows, or one but not the other, or maybe they have more of a golden muzzle or golden eyebrows, or both. And so we use those when I'm identifying bears as well. And then me specifically, if I'm not sure, I do use behaviour to try to identify the bear. So I might look at how they're walking specifically, who they're interacting with. Are they walking with a limp? Those are all things that we take into consideration as well when identifying bears. And then last but not least, we look at the location of the bear. So where did that bear just come from? Where is that bear hanging out at our sanctuary? And honestly, what food sites are the bears using too? Because bears are creatures of habit and often come and go from the same area and prefer, one or two of the same food sites. So we use all of those things when trying to identify one specific bear. If you ever visit our sanctuary, you'll notice pretty quickly that staff walk on the grounds amongst the bears. All of our staff members are trained to do so, and we go through weeks of training to be able to do so. In addition to just training to learn bear behavior and body language, we also undergo a bear safety course. We sign a liability because you are still walking with a wild animal. So, of course, your safety isn't 100% guaranteed. But we do go through an extensive training to be able to walk amongst the bears. And, of course, a huge part of that training is that we try to behave as predictable as we can so the bears behave predictable. We give the bears ample amount of space and watch their body language to make sure that we are not making them feel uncomfortable. We try to maintain a 10-foot distance between us and the bears at all times. I say try because we as humans understand what a 10-foot boundary is, but bears don't always understand that. So if a bear happens to close that 10-foot gap, we do everything we can to try to maintain that 10-foot distance. And of course, we don't touch any of the bears that visit our sanctuary. We don't hand feed, pet, nothing crazy like that. We want the bears to feel like this is a safe space for them to visit, and we don't want to disrespect them by doing anything that could harm us or them.
Let's talk about the question of feeding bears. I'd like to hear your take on that and what we do here.
I mean, first I'm going to say nobody should ever feed bears or wildlife for that matter, ever. We are managing a pre-existing situation, something that Vince started, 50 some years ago, maybe longer. And unfortunately, when he did start feeding, we as a society, we as people didn't know what the consequences would be. And really, I wish that the situation was black and white, but it's far more complicated than that. I think if there was an easy solution, we certainly would have stopped feeding the bears a long time ago. But yeah, we're just trying to do our best with managing that situation and making the most out of it. So that is why we do lots of education when you visit us on deck. We do a lot of outreach programs, school programs, and we're always trying to do more. So we're just trying to make the most out of the situation by doing lots of education with our visitors, on our social media pages, on our email newsletter, and then, of course, with outreach programs. We do a lot of school programs, and we're always trying to add more programs because that is why we are here. That is why we still continue to do what we do, so we can reach as many people and teach them that it is possible to peacefully coexist with not just bears, but all wildlife.
Well, that brings us on. This is called a wildlife sanctuary, after all, so it's not just bears.
Yeah, that was perfect.
So what other animals have we seen here?
Yeah, so we are in the North Woods of Minnesota. So we are about 50 miles, I believe, from Canada. So we get lots of exciting things. I'm just going to give you a list of all the things that I've seen. Or actually, I guess, really, I think the only animals that I have not seen up here that you could possibly see, I've never seen a lynx, and I've never seen a moose on property, but that doesn't mean that other people haven't. And we do get moose tracks too pretty regularly. But yeah, I mean, a couple weeks ago, an otter wobbled across the road in front of me on our road. We are surrounded by water, but I was kind of surprised to see that because it's more, we have like creeks and just kind of small ponds in the area. So that was exciting. But of course, you know, we see porcupine, wolves, skunks, deer, lots of raptors, lots of songbirds. The last couple years, we've seen a lot more pine marten and fishers, which if you don't know what those are, they're in the weasel family. They're cute but vicious little predators. And of course, frequent visitors. We see lots of chipmunk, red squirrel, garter snakes. We get a lot.
So, Steph, what interesting bear behaviours have you seen at the sanctuary?
So, I think there's definitely a few that stand out right off the bat. Probably one of the most interesting and rare behaviors that we saw happened in 2019. It was in the spring. We had our co-founder, Bill Lee, and his photo assistant were taking photos in the woods. We, as a team, had all just sat down in our kitchen for dinner when we heard screaming in the woods. And for those of you that are familiar with the sanctuary, we do not scream in the 2.5 acres where we feed the bears, that area that we call the magic circle. We try to behave as predictable as we can so the bears behave predictable in return. And so us staff members knew immediately that something was wrong and that something had happened in the woods. And so we had leapt out of our seats and ran out to find out what had happened. As we got closer, we saw pretty quickly that a male bear had actually nabbed a cub and was in the process of eating that cub. I, of course, asked Bill and Chris what had happened, and I guess that a mother had left 2 cubs on the ground, which is unusual in itself. Typically, May, June, moms will send their cubs up in the tree for safety, and the cubs stay in the tree until mom gulps, makes that gulping vocalization for them to come back down. And so it was unusual that the cubs were on the ground. Bill said that the male had walked up to them, kind of looked around a little bit to see if mom was near, and ran at the one cub, grabbed him, and just ran off into the woods. At that point, we had heard the screaming that Bill and Chris, they were trying to scare that bear to drop him before killing him. Unfortunately, they were unsuccessful. The male did kill that cub, instantly, and he did end up eating pretty much everything but the nose, all in a matter of maybe 5 minutes, unfortunately. Thankfully, that is a very rare situation. That is the first time in the 10 years that I've been here that I've ever witnessed that. When I asked Bill and co-founder Clary Lee, had that ever happened prior to that, they had never seen that. And so because it was so rare, I did actually reach out to Andy Try with the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources to ask him if that was something that they have ever observed. And because it was so rare, they actually wanted to know all the details about what the scene was and how that actually happened.
And just for listeners who aren't quite as familiar with some bear behaviours, can you contextualise why that adult male bear killed the cub?
Sure. So it was during mating season. Typically, mating season at the sanctuary is May through July. If a male is successful at killing all of the female's offspring, that will make her go back into estrus. So that is just a fancy word for heat for a female bear, in which she would be available to mate again. And so if a male is interested in a female and is successful at killing all of her litter, she will go back into estrus, and then he can mate with her, and she will have his offspring.
Alpha.
Yeah, I was like...
Yeah.
But then, on the flip side, of course, we do see lots of cub and adult bear interactions that are quite different than that. And one of those cases is with a bear that his name is Kenai. Just going to kind of set the scene here for you. So it was in August in 2023. It's during hyperphagia, so the bears are going through that biological process of trying to gain as much weight as they can, so they're frenzied while they're eating. And we have quite a lot of bears in the open meadow area where we feed the bears. I saw Elsa kind of stroll on in with her 3 cubs that year. Elsa is known to be pretty relaxed with her cubs. She'll often let her cubs kind of just wander about the open. Elsa had pulled up to a site. She started to eat. Her cubs kind of started to wander about. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw one of her cubs approaching Kenai. And so I began to approach too, because that isn't always a safe thing for cubs to do. And I was gonna scare that cub in the opposite direction if I had to. But that cub kind of slowly began to creep up to Kenai and the pile of food that he was working on. And Kenai noticed. Kenai kind of looked over at the cub, but then put his head back down to keep eating. And as the cub got closer, it kind of started to sneak up a little bit more, in which the cub was now within reaching distance of Kenai. And Kenai pretty much just put his hand out very slowly, carefully, gently at the cub. Didn't touch the cub, but almost touched the top of the cub's head while he was making a bellowing vocalization. For those of you that are not familiar with it, typically it kind of sounds like this. And it's used usually just as a warning for bears, you're getting too close to my food pile, to my mate, my cubs. But Kenai's, it was a different variation of that. It was a very gentle bellow, so it was more like boop, 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 boop. And I really truly believe that he was trying to be gentle because he knew that he could hurt the cub. Kenai is a very large male, an adult, and I think he was mindful of the fact that he could hurt this cub, and so he just kind of gently booped the cub on the head while making that bellowing vocalization.
Other interesting behaviors you might have seen.
Yeah, so Cashew is a female that visits our sanctuary somewhat sporadically, but this year in particular, she spent a fair amount of time at the sanctuary. So in 2021, she had 3 cubs that year. And that following year, when she was going to disperse them, so again, that's typically May, June is when dispersal takes place, she dispersed all of her cubs except for one of her females. And that female was certainly the runt of the litter. And so when we initially saw her holding on to that female, we thought that maybe she was going to just hold on to it for a little bit longer through, June, July, and then she would disperse that yearling. However, that was not the case. We saw them throughout the whole season, kind of coming and going together. We did not observe Cashew to mate that season, but that did not mean that she did not, because that following season when she came back, so this would be 2022, she came back and she had new spring cubs, and then she had this larger female hanging out with her, which we pretty quickly identified to be her now 2-year-old from the previous year. We did observe them again off and on for the rest of that 2022 season together as a family unit. So she had those 2 spring cubs, and then she had this female from 2021 that appeared to be helping her raise that litter of cubs. And I say that because quite often Cashew would leave the 3 of them together while she would go out and forage for food or kind of go eat within that 2.5 acre where we feed the bears. And typically a female, when they're going to leave cubs, they will send them up the tree for safety. And she didn't do that very often. She quite often would just leave her eldest daughter with those spring cubs. And so we really truly felt like that female was helping her raise her cubs. So pretty unique behavior. That isn't the first time that we've seen that specifically. Well, I should say that's the first time we saw spring cubs with a previous litter.
Like, how long did that yearling stay with Cashew?
So we saw them together through that fall of 2022. So in 23, she came back and she didn't have that which would be a 3-year-old then at that point. She didn't have that female with her anymore. But yeah, that in itself was unique. We have actually seen before where a female has kept her yearlings for 2 seasons, I believe. We had a female that had 4 spring cubs that kept them all through that next year as yearlings, and by that following year that she dispersed them, they were all pretty close to the same size as her.
They all just looked the same, essentially.
They did. They were big.
Is there a bear that you have connected with over the years?
Instantly, Jade comes to mind. Unfortunately, she's no longer with us, but I definitely feel like we made a bond. I feel like we bonded over a specific incident that happened. So she came in, I want to say it was 2016. She came in with a really swollen face. It looked like maybe a limb had fallen on top of her nose because it looked broken.
A tree limb.
A tree limb, yep. It looked broken. She had a huge gash across the bridge of her nose. That sucked. I felt pretty bad for her, but then literally, I don't think it was more than 2-3 days later, she came in with what looked like a broken ankle. She was really having a hard time walking on it. She was doing her best to stay off of it. Thankfully, it was a back paw, so she was able to kind of hobble around. But that summer, because of that, she hung out at our sanctuary and kind of just propped her leg up the whole summer, waiting, really, it felt like, for it to heal. It was almost like she knew that she needed to keep it elevated to reduce the swelling. And so that summer specifically, I spent a lot of time bringing her not just food, but water too. And I mean, really every day I would just bring her food and water and we'd have a little chat, and I would just kind of work around her and keep checking on her to see how she was doing. And I know she knew that she should come here and hang out here that summer so we could take care of her. And she did. I mean, she did not leave the sanctuary too much that season because it was just too difficult for her to do so. And so, yeah, just with every year after that, I mean, of course, I spoiled her with only the best of the best. So bears love peanuts in the shell, so she got a lot of that in the years after that. And I mean, I do believe that she could not only recognize me by my scent, because bears have an amazing sense of smell and that's how they recognize each other, but I also think she knew her name, and I think she knew my voice too, just because of the way that she responded to me when I spoke to her or called after her.
She seemed a very chill bear.
She was a very laid-back bear, yes. Even outside of the year when she potentially broke her ankle, you could quite often find her lounging in a tree, taking a nap at the base of the tree, or kind of just sprawled all over some cut-down logs, really, yeah. That was her favorite.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Well, aside from bears, what other animals are you passionate about?
I am an avid birder. I absolutely love getting to bird all year round, really. In the Northwoods of Minnesota, we're really lucky with everything that we could possibly see. So I spend a lot of time doing that. And of course, the sanctuary is a great place to see all kinds of birds. But in the off season, I spend typically anywhere from 1 month to 6 months in Washington State chasing orcas, because I'm pretty orca obsessed as well. And so when I say chasing orcas, I should specify that there's a social media page called the Orca Network, in which sightings are reported on there daily up to, the minute. And so if you just pay attention to that and you're in the right place at the right time, you get lucky and can drive from the shore, from location to location, to catch the orcas from shore, which is a lot more rewarding to me than taking a boat tour. Those are so cool too, but it's pretty rewarding to get to chase them from shore.
No, it does. Sounds really fun. So we'll go back to bears. What resources or books would you recommend for people who want to know more about bears?
Shout out to the North American Bear Center. They have an awesome website. It's bear.org. A wealth of information that Dr. Lynn Rogers has done years and years of research. And so I like that he updates that information pretty regularly, and that it's really easy to understand for just general public that want to know more about every topic for bears. I also love bearwise.org. That's an awesome resource, especially if you're having maybe bears visit your yard and that there might be an attractant. It's a great site to kind of troubleshoot why they're being attracted to the area in the first place and what to do about it. And then, of course, there's lots of great books out there, but if you're really looking for something to learn specifically a lot about bears, I love the Great Bear Almanac. That's by Gary Brown. And then I love the Living with Bears book. I think it's Linda Masterson. That's the author of that. That's a great book.
Yeah.
And then all the books by Benjamin Kilham or any of his published works, I just love. He has an emphasis on bear behavior specifically, which I'm super passionate about and I think is really interesting. So all of his books and published works are just fun reads.
Oh, cool. I'm going to throw this one at you now. So what's your favorite bear fact?
Probably the fact that this is a Benjamin Kilham find, that they use that Jacobson organ and that Kilham gland to teach their cubs. A mother teaches her cubs what is safe to eat by using that. So basically, she'll take her cubs to a food source. So maybe it's a berry patch. She'll put the berries in her mouth. She'll chew. She'll open her mouth and allow the cubs to collect that scent particle in the air with the Jacobson organ and the Kilham gland. And that tells them what that food source is, that it's safe for them to eat. And then they store that memory of where to find that in their brain in like a mental map of where there are reliable food sources. Yeah, I just think that's so cool. I think it's fairly new that when he discovered that.
Mm-hmm. Bears are cool, basically.
Yeah.
Off about that, any other sort of fun, interesting bear or animal stories you want to share?
Because we do have other wildlife that come here, sometimes we get to observe interactions between bears and other animals. Probably the most exciting was one day we had a porcupine wander right into our feeding area. It was, I think it was in May, and there was a mother named Brian. That's a story in itself, but it was a female named Brian, and she had 3 cubs that year. When the porcupine wandered in, it caught those cubs' attention immediately, and they began to approach that porcupine. And Brian clearly knew that animal could potentially harm her cubs, so she began to make a gulping vocalization. That sounds like this. And really what that vocalization is it's a command that the cubs sometimes listen to, but usually she's instructing them to do something. So the most common situation where we hear that is she'll sit at the base of the tree, she makes that vocalization, and she's telling them to climb up the tree or to climb down the tree. But in this case, she was using that vocalization certainly to tell them, no, don't pursue that, that's dangerous. But they didn't listen because kids being kids, sometimes they're going to do what they want. And so they did start to chase the porcupine. I don't think I knew just how fast porcupines could run until that situation. He ran quite quickly to the tree and started to climb the tree, which, yes, porcupine are also awesome tree climbers. but so are the bears. So the cubs ran to the tree too and were about to climb up the tree, but then Brian's vocalization started to get more urgent sounding, so they were really quick. And she was kind of running after them as if, like I said, to say, like, no, that's dangerous, you're going to get hurt. And thankfully, the cubs did at that point then recognize that there was a threat, and so they stopped pursuing the porcupine. But it does happen. We have certainly seen cubs and yearlings come in with a face full of quill. Typically, we only intervene if it could be life-threatening, which I thankfully have never seen where it prevented a bear from eating. Usually it's just kind of like the side of their face. But yeah.
How many bears do we actually see that visit the sanctuary?
Yeah, so we don't know for sure, of course. We know that we had those 6 that were collared, and we had about 80 that were easily identifiable, that were named. We've lost quite a few since then. I would say we've probably lost about 15 of those named bears. But yeah, I guess we know for sure that we have 80. And of course, we do see different bears that come in the spring, and then you typically won't see them again later in the season. We have bears that just visit us in August. And again, outside of like the 6 bears that were collared, we know how far those bears traveled for food. But yeah, we don't know just how many bears are visiting and from how far, which would be awesome to get to collar some more bear so we could learn more, for sure, have a bigger sample size.
How often is it that you happen to sort of like put on a TV show, like, you know, an animal documentary, or you're out and about and you see some photos of bears and you think, I know that bear, or that's from the sanctuary?
I think it's so cool that it happens all the time. So my husband Ryan and I, we travel quite a bit in the off season. We spend a lot of time, like I said, out in Washington State, but we also spend a lot of time in Tennessee in the Smoky Mountains. And we see regularly, you know, books, postcards, magnets, posters, cards that have sanctuary bears on them. Often we recognize it as an individual bear specifically that has been named. And then, of course, we do see, like in the 10 years that I've been here, we probably have a couple film crews that come out every season. So it's typically like Nat Geo, the Smithsonian, Disney, Netflix, people that come out to get footage for their documentaries. And so quite often, if you're watching something that has American black bears featured in the documentary, quite often it's footage from our bear sanctuary.
That's kind of neat. I know I did see something on Netflix, so I was like, I recognize that.
Yeah.
I was like, that's a food site.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Right. That's usually how I think that looks like a sanctuary bear, and then you see just enough of a food site to be like, yep.
Let's talk the 2024 season.
This year was certainly unique in itself. It actually the season started about a month earlier than normal. So typically all of our staff are back on grounds feeding the bears by May 1st and the absolute latest. We did actually start to feed. It was early April that we began the feeding schedule because we had a very mild winter. We did not have any snow. And so because of that, the bears woke up early and some of the grass started to green up a little bit earlier than normal. And so there was food available, so the bears didn't need to hibernate anymore. And so because of that, all behaviors, activities were really off in comparison to a normal season. So with that too, hyperphagia, typically we see that begin end of July, early August. It began, I think it was mid-July this year when that began, which in the 10 years that I've been here, that was certainly the earliest that I have ever seen. And with that, of course, meant that hyperphagia ended earlier, which was all right. So during this conversation right now, it is mid-September, and for the most part, most of the bears have left for their dens.
How has the sort of attendance been?
Yeah, so we did have a much quieter season than normal. So
That's people attendance.
yes, people attendance. I would say we ended up actually seeing, I think, 2,000-3,000 less people than we did last year. Last year, our numbers were even less than the previous year. I believe that throughout our state that attendance overall for similar organizations and businesses was pretty similar, where people saw just less people getting out and about and traveling. So hopefully that will not be the case for next year.
Yeah.
But yeah, sadly, our attendance was down. And then, of course, when attendance is down, there's less people that are donating. There's less people that are buying merchandise in our shop. And so everything was slightly down in comparison to last year.
So looking ahead, what are we thinking for 2025?
Initially, when we were doing the blueprint for that accommodations facility, which has a laundry room, 4 bathrooms, and then a gathering area with kind of a little kitchenette area. Our hopes were to have a full-on kitchen on that site. However, financially, we just weren't able to raise enough funds at that point. And so our hopes are that we can do an add-on to that facility within the next couple of years. And so we will begin raising money now for that kitchen add-on to that facility. And then we did also do 5 campsite hookups. So they're full hookups with the hopes of attracting more volunteers, retired people that have campers that are able to park their camper, have a full hookup, and then volunteer with us for hopefully extended periods of time. Every year, I make it a goal to extend our outreach program and just our overall educational programs. So yes, we do have a few community-type gathering educational programs planned for this fall and next spring.
And is the sanctuary ever open in the wintertime?
We are not open, so we do just operate from Memorial Day to Labor Day for the public. So that is when we allow people to come see the bears. And of course, we are open strictly just those hours because that's typically when we do have bears visiting, because all the bears that visit are wild. So they come and go as they please. They hibernate like a normal bear would hibernate. And so we do have to close by Labor Day because the bears move out.
I was just wondering, because I know you've had a couple of snowshoe programs in the past. Were you thinking of starting them again?
So yes, if there is an interest, we will absolutely do that again. I had every intention of doing that this last year again, but then there was no snow. I think the first one that we did, I believe we did one in 2018 and then 2019. And then of course with COVID for 2020 and 2021, there wasn't any interest, so we didn't do that. But yes, given that we have ample amount of snow, we will absolutely be doing that again this winter.
Oh, that's fun. What's the one thing that you hope visitors or listeners will take away from learning about the sanctuary and bears in general?
The biggest one is to not start feeding bears or any wildlife for that matter. Anytime people intervene, it never turns out well. Yeah, I think we should just let nature take care of itself because they do a fine job. But really, when we have visitors specifically, I hope that we plant in some kind of seed with every person to where they've learned something that they can share with other people. And I think for me, the most important is how to handle when people have bears visiting their yard or breaking into their trash, or, if you just happen to see a bear, what an appropriate response is and how to, not have bears be attracted to a yard in the first place. I think that's the most important thing to me, because I truly believe that peaceful coexistence with bears is totally possible. We just need to be more understanding of not just bears, but all wildlife to do so, and to just be tolerable. Like, seeing a bear pass through your yard isn't necessarily a bad thing. That's actually a really rewarding, exciting thing, as long as you're not doing anything to attract them there in the first place.
Oh, cool. Anything else you want to say?
I don't think so. Thank you so much for having me on this podcast. It's been really fun to just chat about bears.
It's never a bad thing. Oh, thank you very much.
Yes.
The Bear Den, the American Bear Association podcast, was written and presented by me, Philip Stubley. The music was composed by React Music. Thank you to everyone who has helped make this podcast possible, including Karen Hausman, Bill Lee, Clary Lee, Stephanie Horner, Donna Brzezinka, Ross Coyer, and Angie Page. If you are interested in DNR research and want to know more, you can find information and publications at www.dnr.state.mn.us. You can find out more about the American Bear Association at www.americanbear.org. You can find Vince Schutte Wildlife Sanctuary on Facebook and Instagram. You can ask questions and submit comments about the podcast to pstubley@americanbear.org. The ABA is a special circumstance. We do not condone feeding wild animals. If you enjoy this podcast, help support the ABA either by donating, becoming an ABA member, symbolically adopting a bear, or come visit the sanctuary during the season and say hello.
And if you do enjoy this, please do us a favour. It'll barely take any of your time, I promise. On whatever platform you're listening to this on, please either follow us, click the bell for updates, notifications, please share with family and friends, and rate the podcast, as it all helps us grow and is greatly appreciated.